At 25, my 60-year-old neighbor. She exuded a grace that only time and experience could bring. Her silver hair was always neatly styled in a bun, and her smile was warm enough to brighten the entire block. She had lived in the grand house next door for as long as I could remember, while we exchanged occasional pleasantries. We didn't know each other well. At first, I didn't give much thought to her, beyond the fact that she was a widow, living alone, with a considerable fortune from her late husband's investments. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue bringing you more fascinating, true stories like this one. And don't forget to watch this video till the end and like the video, because this story is going to be incredibly interesting. Please hit the like button to show your support. I had recently moved to the neighborhood, hoping to build a career in real estate. And like most young men, I noticed her massive house full of potential. I knew she was wealthy, but I didn't initially think of taking advantage of that. That thought only emerged when things began to get tough. Bills were piling up faster than expected, and despite my efforts, I wasn't seeing the returns I had hoped for. My situation was precarious, and one night as I stared at my empty bank account, I thought about Sophia. She had everything and I had nothing. I had heard rumors that she was charitable, and I wondered if she would be willing to lend me some money or invest in my ventures, but I knew I couldn't just ask her directly. She was too sharp, and I suspected she could sense when someone had ulterior motives. That's when I decided to learn more about her. I started spending more time in the neighborhood, running into her at the market, the post office, and anywhere I could. Over time, we struck up conversations, and I learned more about her. Her love of fine art, her past in the fashion industry, and how she always made time for others. But there was more to her. Every time I saw her, my admiration grew. Sophia was no ordinary woman. She had LED, a life filled with experiences I couldn't even imagine. And as I observed her, I started to wonder if I could be part of her world, in a way that wasn't about money. One day on my way home from work, I saw her standing on her porch. She waved and called out to me, her smile lighting up her face. "Jack, how are you? You seemed a little stressed lately. Is everything all right?" she asked. I smiled back, trying to hide my unease. "Yeah, just the usual. You know how it is when you're starting a business. Come on in for coffee," she said warmly. "I've been meaning to check in with you. You don't have to be alone all the time." I hesitated, but something in her voice made me feel welcome. I didn't realize it then, but the moment she invited me in, everything began to change. Inside her house, I was struck by the elegance and simplicity. Soft lighting, understated but rich decor, and the faint scent of lavender in the air. We sat on her leather sofa, sipping coffee, talking about my business life and the challenges we all face. What surprised me was how much she opened up. I expected her to be distant, even aloof, but Sophia was warm, kind, and surprisingly relatable. She shared stories of her struggles in business, her late husband, and how, after years of hard work, she built a life she was proud of. It was the first time in a long time I felt like I wasn't alone in the world. Despite her being decades older, Sophia felt more like a mentor. Her wisdom and understanding made me feel like I wasn't just talking to a neighbor. I was talking to someone who truly saw me. As the conversation shifted from business to more personal topics, I began to feel more comfortable with her, as if I could talk about anything and she would understand. We discussed relationships, loss, and the things that keep us awake at night. It hit me suddenly that I had begun to look at her in a way that was more than just friendly at first. It was subtle, but the attraction was undeniable. I tried to push the thought aside and focus on our conversation. But as Sophia leaned forward to pour more coffee, I found myself staring at her hands, the graceful lines of her face, and the way the light played off her silver hair. The next evening, as I passed her house again, I saw her through the window walking from the kitchen to the bathroom. I couldn't help but notice the elegance in every step she took. I found myself thinking of her constantly, almost obsessively, and I knew I had to see her again. When I rang her doorbell that evening, I wasn't expecting anything unusual. I just wanted to continue our conversation. But when she opened the door, I felt a shift, a subtle tension in the air that I didn't fully understand. Sophia, dressed casually in a soft robe, invited me in without hesitation. "You're just in time. I was about to shower," she said, her voice calm yet playful. "Would you like to wait here while I freshen up?" I smiled awkwardly, unsure of how to respond. "I can wait outside if you prefer." "No, stay." She insisted, her tone soft yet firm. "You've been a good friend, Jack. You can stay." I nodded and stepped inside. But as the minutes passed, I felt an electric tension in the air. Every part of me was drawn to her in a way I couldn't explain. I tried to focus on the television, but my mind kept drifting back to her. Suddenly, the sound of the shower running filled the house. My mind raised the idea of her so close. The faint steam coming from the bathroom door quickened my pulse. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling. After what felt like forever, I stepped toward the bathroom door and opened it. She was standing there taking a shower, her soft and glowing body so beautiful as she applied body lotion. She didn't expect me to come in. Lost in her own thoughts, I stood there mesmerized. And when she turned to grab her towel, she saw me standing there, instantly covering her chest in shock. "Jack," she said softly, her voice uncertain but kind. I didn't expect you to still be here." I instinctively stood up, unsure how to respond. But as she stepped closer, I saw the vulnerability in her eyes. It was then I realized how much she had let her guard down in front of me, and how much I had let mine down too. Before I could speak, Sophia took another step forward, closing the gap between us. She reached out and brushed a lock of damp hair from my forehead. Her fingers lingered on my skin for a moment, longer than necessary, and I felt a rush of electricity. I couldn't pull away in that moment. Everything else faded slowly, almost testing the waters. Sophia leaned forward and pressed her lips softly against mine. It was a gentle, tender kiss that caught me off guard but felt completely natural. I was surprised, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to say, didn't know what any of this meant, but in that moment, all I could think about was her. Her soft lips, the warmth of her skin, and the delicate way her hands rested on my chest. When we pulled back, I looked into her eyes, trying to find the words to explain what had just happened. But Sophia simply smiled, her expression soft. "It's okay, Jack. It's okay," she reassured me, stepping back slightly, giving me space to process what had just occurred. My heart was still racing and my mind was filled with confusion. I wasn't sure whether I was feeling guilt or something deeper, something I had been trying to suppress since I first met her. Sophia's eyes were calm, like she had known this moment would come. She reached out, brushing her hand against mine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly seen. Not as the struggling young man next door, but as someone with emotions, vulnerabilities, and fears. It was as though her touch acknowledged that part of me I had kept hidden for so long. "Jack," she whispered, "I think we both know something has shifted between us. It's okay to feel whatever you're feeling right now." "I'm not going anywhere," her words, simple but profound, hit me deeply. I had entered her life with an agenda, trying to get ahead to make my business succeed. But somewhere along the way, I started to see her not as a means to an end, but as someone real. I realized that I had crossed a line I hadn't even known existed. I don't know what to say, I admitted. My voice shaky, I never expected this. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Sophia smiled softly and gently shook her head. You don't have to say anything, Jack. It's okay, we don't always have the answers right away. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. Her words were reassuring, but they only left me with more questions. What did this mean for us? Could we just pretend nothing had happened? Or did we have to confront whatever was starting to grow between us? She stepped back toward the bathroom, her hand lingering on my shoulder just a moment longer than necessary. I felt the warmth of her touch seeped through me, and I was suddenly aware of how close we were. The air between us seemed charged, almost electric. Every nerve in my body felt alive. Aware of the tension that now filled the space between us. Give me a moment, Sophia said softly. Pulling away, I need to get dressed. But we'll talk, Jack. We'll figure this out. I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. She disappeared into the bathroom and I stood there, still caught in the whirlwind of emotions. My mind was racing, trying to piece together everything that had just happened. The kiss, the way she had responded to me. Was it real? Was it something we both wanted? Or had I misunderstood everything? As I sat on the sofa, I tried to calm myself, but my mind kept returning to her. Her touch, her smile, the way she made me feel like I mattered. A few minutes later, Sophia returned, now dressed in a light blue blouse and comfortable jeans. She looked the same, yet somehow everything had changed. Her walk towards me had a different energy, quiet, strong, and reassuring. She seemed completely at ease, as though she had come to terms with what had happened. Are you okay? She asked, her eyes studying me with a calmness that made me feel vulnerable, like she could see right through me. I nodded, though my voice still trembled when I spoke. I'm okay, just confused about everything. Sophia smiled gently, her face full of understanding. She sat down beside me on the sofa, close enough that I could feel her warmth, but not too close. She respected the space between us, letting me process everything at my own pace. Confusion is normal, she said softly. You don't have to have all the answers right away. We'll take this one step at a time, Jack. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together. Her words were like a balm to my racing thoughts. Just being in her presence, knowing she wasn't rushing me, allowed me to take a deep breath and slow down. The tension in my stomach slowly eased. Thank you, I whispered, for not pushing me, for being patient with me. Sophia looked at me with a soft gaze. You don't have to thank me. I'm here for you, Jack, and I'm not going anywhere. For the first time that evening, I truly believed her. That night I went to bed with a mixture of emotions, confusion, excitement, uncertainty, but also a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. Sophia had given me something no one else had. The space to be myself, to acknowledge my feelings without fear of judgment. The next morning, as I walked past her house on my way to work, I noticed the blinds were drawn and the house seemed unusually quiet. I couldn't help but wonder if Sophia was thinking about what had happened, to the kiss, the moments we shared. Were they as important to her as they were to me? I didn't want to overthink it. I couldn't. All I knew was that whatever came next, I wanted to take things slowly. With Sophia, I had found someone who didn't rush, who didn't force things, and that gave me hope. Maybe we could figure out what this was between us together. I didn't fully understand what Sophia meant by that at the time, but sitting alone in my apartment that night, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The memory of her touch, the gentleness of her kiss replayed over and over in my mind. It hit me I was falling for her. Not for her wealth, not for the life I thought I could gain, but for who she was, the kindness in her eyes. The warmth in her voice, the way she made me feel like I mattered. I had come into her life with one thing in mind: to get closer to her for my own gain. But what had started as a plan, a carefully crafted scheme, had slowly, almost imperceptibly, turned into something real. I had started to care for her, not for what she could give me, but for who she was. The guilt hit me hard, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to face what I had done. Sophia had opened her heart to me, welcomed me into her life without question. She had shown me kindness, patience, and respect, and I had taken advantage of that. The realization was painful, but it made something clear. I had to come clean. The next day, I walked over to Sophia's house, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. I wasn't sure what I expected to find. But I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't keep hiding the truth. Not from her, not from myself. I rang the doorbell, my fingers trembling slightly when Sophia answered. She smiled warmly as always. But there was something in her eyes, a knowing look that made my stomach churn. "Jack, come in," she said, stepping aside to let me in. I could feel the weight of her gaze on me as I crossed the threshold. The familiar scent of lavender filled the air. But today it didn't bring me comfort. It felt like a sign that something was about to change. We sat in the living room, the same spot where we shared so many conversations. But today the air was different. It felt heavy, charged with the weight of unspoken words. "Sophia," I began, my voice low, "I have to tell you something. Something I've been hiding from you." Her expression softened, but she didn't interrupt. She just waited as though she already knew what I was about to say. "I came into this with a plan," I confessed, my words rushing out. "I thought I could use you, get close to you for what you have. I was selfish, and I thought I could manipulate the situation to my advantage." Sophia didn't respond immediately. She just looked at me, her eyes full of understanding, but also something deeper, something I couldn't quite place. She wasn't angry. She wasn't upset. She was calm. "I know, Jack," she finally said, her voice gentle but firm. "I knew from the very beginning, but I didn't want to believe it at first. I thought maybe you'd come to see me for who I really am, not just for what I have." A rush of shame flooded through me. She knew she had known all along. "I'm so sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "I never meant to hurt you. I never meant to deceive you. But the more I got to know you, the more I realized I wasn't just after your money." I stopped myself, unsure how to continue. How could I explain that I had fallen in love with her, not for what she had, but for who she was? Sophia's gaze softened, and she reached for my hand. Her touch was warm, reassuring. "I know, Jack," she said again. "I've seen the change in you. You're not the same person you were when you first came into my life. I'm not angry with you. I'm just glad that you came to this realization, that you understand now." I looked at her, bewildered. "How could you know?" She smiled softly. "Because I've been around long, enough to recognize when someone is hiding their true intentions. But I also knew that if you were willing to face the truth, you would have to see me for who I really am. Not just the wealthy widow next door, but the woman who's been living alone in this house for years. The woman who wants companionship, honesty, and love, not just someone who wants to take from her." A weight lifted off my shoulders, but there was still so much left unsaid. "I'm sorry, Sophia," I said again. "I truly am. I never meant to hurt you." Sophia gently squeezed my hand. "I know, Jack, but what matters now is what comes next." I looked up at her, my heart in my throat. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath, her gaze steady. "We both have a choice now. We can either move on and go our separate ways, or we can see where this goes. You've shown me that you've changed. And maybe, just maybe, there's something between us. But only if it's real. Only if you're completely honest with me. No more lies, no more pretending. Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. I didn't know what the future would hold. But in that moment, I knew I wanted to take a chance. I wanted to see where this could go. For the first time, I wasn't looking at her with ulterior motives. I was looking at her because I truly wanted to be with her. I want this, Sophia, I said, my voice full of conviction. I want to be with you, not for what you have. But because I care about you, I've realized that I love you. A soft smile curved her lips as she stood up and walked over to me. She kept my face in her hands, her touch gentle but firm, grounding me in that moment. I love you too, Jack, she whispered before leaning in to kiss me. It was a slow, tender kiss filled with everything we hadn't said yet. Everything we both wanted and needed. It was a kiss that spoke of forgiveness, second chances, and a love that had grown from something unexpected into something real. As we pulled away, I looked at her, feeling peace settle over me. I didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be, beside her as partners, as equals, as lovers, and that was enough.